multiple herbicide-resistant water hemp in Canada, flea bane in Ontario. And I will spend the majority of my presentation talking about how do you control these resistant biotypes in a corn, soybean, wheat rotation. Before I go through my presentation, every field shot that you see in my presentation this afternoon is from a commercial farm in Southwestern Ontario. None of these studies were done on the research station. We don't have water hemp on the 2 research stations where I conducted research over the last 35 years. And up till now, the density of Canada flea bane hasn't been enough to conduct trials at either Ridgetown or Exeter. So what I'll be showing you is real situations that real farmers in Ontario are dealing with. And there's 2 slides that you will see our greenhouse research. So first of all, I'll talk about water hemp. In terms of the biology of water hemp, it's a summer annual broadleaf weed. So you think it's really similar to red root pigweed, lamb's quarters, common ragweed. A summer annual weed germinates and emerges in the spring. It grows vegetatively, flowers, and it sets viable seed before the winter sets in. What really separates water hemp from other weed species in Ontario is water hemp is a dioecious species. So that means that you have separate male and female plants, just like human beings. They're separate males and females, and therefore you have huge genetic diversity within water hemp. And so that genetic diversity has allowed water hemp to evolve resistance to multiple different herbicide modes of action. In Ontario, it's evolved resistance to group 2, 5, 9, 14, and 27 herbicides. And what's really interesting in terms of water hemp, it was always here. Water hemp has been in Ontario for more than a century, and up till about 10 years ago, it wasn't a big problem in corn and soybean, or on corn and soybean farms in Ontario. And biotypes have evolved that are adapted to our current corn and soybean production systems, and they've become huge yield robbers in the province. So the pictures at the front on the screen are from a colleague at University of Nebraska. And so the male plant on the left, it has the anthers and it releases the pollen. And obviously the female plant has the pistil and its receptacle for that pollen. And you have 2 distinct plants, both male and female water hemp plants. Another really interesting thing about water hemp, in contrast to most other summer annual broadleaf weeds, is that water hemp begins emerging in the spring and it emerges through the entire growing season in Ontario. And so this is some research that was conducted by a graduate student of mine. His name was Mike Shriver. And what we asked Mike to do is he set up permanent quadrats on one farm in southwestern Ontario. Every Monday morning, he would go to that farm. He would count how many water hemp plants came up in the previous 7 days. Then he would spray that plot with Liberty because it has no residual activity in the soil, burns off any emerged water hemp, and then he came back the following Monday morning, and he did it over the whole summer. So if you look at the June 1 date, Mike counted about 400 water hemp plants that came up per square meter in the previous 7 days. Make sure that you notice that this scale is a logarithmic scale, so it goes 10, 100, and 1,000, and otherwise we wouldn't be able to present the data. Anyways, notice on June 14 and the 7 days before that, about 500 plants came up per square meter. What really surprised me though in this research, if you look at the 7 days prior to August 22nd over here, there was still 100 plants were coming up per square meter in the 7 days prior to August 14. And you'll notice that water hemp was still coming up on October 25. So the point that I want to make is that water hemp, it begins to emerge after the pre-plant herbicide burn down in no-till or after the last cultivation for seedbed preparation in conventional till, and it continues to emerge through the entire growing season. That makes it a much bigger weed management challenge than other summer annuals that only come up, let's say, from May 15 to June 15. In terms of the competitiveness of water hemp, it can go up to 2.5 centimeters or an inch a day. And you can see in the picture there, it can grow up to heights of greater than 3.5 meters. This happens to be Mike Shriver, and this picture was taken by another graduate student at the time, Brittany Hedges. Mike's about my height, right? So I'm 6'2", so I'm a little less than 2 meters. And you can see that this plant is almost twice the height of Mike Shriver. In Southwestern Ontario, water hemp will grow greater than 3.5 meters in height. And based on research in Ontario, in corn, the average yield loss was 19%. And in our most competitive environment, the yield loss was 99%. And in soybean, the yield loss was higher, was an average of 42%. And in the most competitive environment, the yield loss was 93%. So in terms of the herbicide resistance, this is the situation on some farms in Ontario. So these are, this is a seed lot that we collected from a farm in Middlesex County. And just take note of it as I go through. This biotype is resistant to the group 2 herbicide Pursuit. It's resistant to the group 5 herbicide Atrazine, the group 5 herbicide Sencor, the group 9 herbicide Roundup, the group 14 herbicide. We use Cobra in our trials. You think Reflex and Blazer. It's resistant to the group 27 herbicide Callisto. And it's resistant to a tank mix of Callisto plus Atrazine. So if you're the unlucky farmer and you have this biotype on your farm, that removes about 80% of the current herbicides used for weed management in corn and soybean in Ontario. And so we did a survey across Ontario, and water hemp is now present in 17 counties in the province. And based on a survey that I did of certified crop advisors in Ontario during the fall of 2023, so about 2 years ago, I surveyed all the CCAs in the province, and they said that on 4% of the Ontario corn and soybean acres, Ontario farmers have changed their weed management practices because of the presence of water hemp on their farms. Notice that some biotypes in some counties, it's only resistant to the group 2 and 9 herbicide. The green is 4-way resistance, the dark blue is 3-way, and the purple is 2-way resistance. Really interesting, in 7 of those 17 counties, there are biotypes that are resistant to the group 2, 5, 9, 14, and 27 herbicides. And you will notice that they are present in eastern Ontario as well as in the southwest. So those biotypes are right across the province of Ontario. So a really legitimate question that you could ask, you could say, so why is this problem increasing in the province of Ontario in the last 10 years? And one of the reasons is there has been a trend to reduce strip and no-till crop production in the province. And a reduction in tillage favors small-seeded annual broadleaf weeds like lamb's quarters, pigweed, common ragweed, and it favors a small-seeded broadleaf weed like water hemp. And as you go to reduce tillage, you have a reduction in your large seeded broadleaf weeds like velvet leaf and cocklebur, and you have an increase in the small seeded ones. And another reason why it's an increasing problem is that it's a dioecious species, has huge genetic diversity, and there are biotypes that are adapted to corn and soybean production systems in Ontario. Because of that genetic diversity, there are biotypes that have evolved multiple herbicide resistance, and there's 5-way resistance in Ontario. And finally, water hemp has some advantageous genetic traits. It has a rapid growth rate, it has high fecundity, or you could say it has high seed production. It has prolonged seed dormancy and viability in the soil. It all depends on which study you read in the peer-reviewed literature. Some weed scientists have concluded that water hemp seed either rots or it germinates within 5 years of being released from the mother plant. And other studies say it can remain viable in the soil for 20 years, right? So if you have water hemp on your farm and it returns seed to the soil, you could be battling that weed for the next 20 years. And then it has that extended emergence pattern that I showed you earlier. So now I'll talk about, so how do you manage water hemp in a corn, soybean, wheat rotation? And so first of all, I'll talk about weed control in corn. So in terms of water hemp, this is a trial that we did in Middlesex County. In Ontario, the average corn yield for the 5 cropping seasons from 2019 to 2023, the average corn yield in the province was 168 bushels per acre. The average selling price was $6.56. And so over those 5 cropping seasons, the average total revenue in corn was $11,002 per acre. On the average field where we had water hemp, the yield loss in corn was 18.5%, and that represents a loss of $201 per acre. This happens to be a trial in Middlesex County. The yield loss was 99%, and if that farmer had not implemented any water hemp management tactics on his farm, our estimate is that he would have lost $1,091 due to one weed species on his farm. So we looked at the various pre-emergence and post-emergence herbicide options in corn, and you can see that Callisto provided 86% control. That's not good enough. I mean, there's lots of farms in Southwestern Ontario that have 1,000 plants per square meter. If you have 86% control, that's still 140 escapes per square meter. You probably can't see your soybean crop even at that density. And so then Converge, Integrity, and Acuron provided between 89 and 92% control. I think they're essentially equivalent. And you could go to your farm retail outlet, see which one you get at the lowest price, and use any one of those, and they give approximately the same level of water hemp control. So this is one of the experiments we did. Here you can see the control plot. And Acuron was applied pre-emergence, and on average in Ontario, in our trials, it gave 92% control. Really interesting, we had 36 experiments on farms in Ontario, not at the research station. And here you can see the weed control or water hemp control with Acuron. In 28% of those 36 trials, Acuron gave 100% control of water hemp. Then in 50% of the experiments, it was between 90 and 99% control. In 8% of the experiments, it was someplace in the 80s. In 6%, it was in the 70s. In 6%, it was in the 60s. And the lowest control we had on one farm, and it was 52%. And so I just said that Acuron is one of the best herbicides for managing water hemp on your farm. And a really good question you should have for me is, why does it provide such variable control across these 36 farms, right? So why is the control variable? And water hemp control with Acuron is variable from field to field and year to year due to, and I'm sure you're not surprised, the first one is rainfall for application. So every soil applied herbicide, right? The reason why you get weed control on your farm is the herbicide is dissolved into soil water solution. As the developing weed seedlings taking up water to support growth, you as a farmer hope it takes up a lethal dose of the herbicide and you get excellent weed control on your farm. And if you don't get rainfall within 7 to 14 days after applying Acuron, you're going to have disappointing control of water hemp. Weed control with soil applied herbicides is influenced by soil characteristics, and there's reduced weed control on heavy textured soils with high organic matter and high cation exchange capacity. That simply means there's more binding sites for the herbicide. Always remember that if a herbicide, if this is the soil colloid, this is the herbicide, if it's bound to the soil, it's biologically unavailable for weed control. That's why you get poor weed control on heavy textured soils that are high in organic matter and cation exchange capacity. And then you get poor weed control on low pH soils, and that's probably because low pH you have a higher concentration of hydrogen atoms, and so the herbicide takes a positive charge, the soil has a negative charge. Now the herbicide is bound to the soil colloid on that low pH soil, and it's biologically unavailable for weed control. The reason why you get variable control could be due to the resistance profile. Is it resistant to the group 5 and 27 herbicides in Ontario? Weed density. Always remember the activity of every herbicide is influenced by weed density. It doesn't matter whether it's a soil applied herbicide or a post-emergence herbicide. You always get better efficacy in fields with low weed pressure than you do in fields with high weed pressure. I'm sure this number is going to surprise you. On one farm where we did our trials, there was 8,000 water hemp plants per square meter. That's the density that some farmers are dealing with in Ontario. It's going to be influenced by time of weed emergence, as I showed you earlier, and it will be influenced by the competitiveness of the crop. How quickly does the crop canopy? Water hemp is considered to be a heliophyte. It's a light-loving plant, and if the canopy closes quickly, you will have very few late-emerging water hemp plants. In terms of corn post-emergence, you can see that Callisto, Converge, Shieldex, Acuron, Flexi, Lotus, Armazon Pro and Acuron provided 91 to 96% control. If you look at the slide at the front of the room, you'll think, wow, that's pretty good. We have lots of options to manage water hemp in corn post-emergence in Ontario. These are the 7 best herbicides of all the post-emergence herbicides we evaluated. We evaluated all of them that are in the provincial weed control guide. Everyone in the room should notice all of these are group 27s. And in this part of Ontario, there's farms with group 27 resistant water hemp. None of these would work if you have group 27 resistance on your farm. So, boy, I should learn more quickly than that. Anyway, so in terms of post-emergence, this is just one of them. And you can see the control plot, and then the excellent control provided by Lotus plus atrazine on that particular farm. So I think that every farmer that has water hemp on their farm should plan to use a 2-pass weed control program. And what I mean by that is you should plan to put on an effective soil-applied herbicide and then come back with a post-emergence herbicide. Notice here, Converge and Acuron provided 90 and 98% control in these experiments. And then where it was followed by Liberty, the control was 97 to 99%. And in this experiment here, we put down a non-group 27 herbicide soil applied, so Primextra or Integrity. And you can see the control was 94 to 97%. And then where we followed it with Callisto plus atrazine applied post-emergence, the control was 99%. The bottom line is that water hemp can be managed in corn in Ontario. So be prepared to use a 2-pass weed control program of a soil-applied herbicide followed by a post-herbicide. In the first weed control program, I'm using a group 27 herbicide applied, soil applied, and now I'm coming back post-emergence with a non-group 27. And so you could start with either Acuron, Converge, or Callisto and come back with Liberty post-emergence. Or in the second program, I've used a non-group 27 soil applied, either Integrity or Primextra, and then come back with a group 27 herbicide such as Acuron, Lotta, Shieldex, or Callisto. And both of them provide really good control of multiple herbicide-resistant water. So now I'll talk about strategies for the control of multiple herbicide-resistant water hemp in a soybean. I did say this right at the beginning of my presentation that all of my slides are taken from commercial farms in Ontario. This is a commercial soybean field, and here you can see some soybean plants. Anyways, that's the density that this farmer's dealing with in terms of multiple herbicide-resistant water hemp on his farm. So how do you control it with that density? So in terms of looking at the weed-free control, anyways, the Ontario soybean average yield over a 5-year period was 49.2 bushels per acre. The average selling price was $15.60. So soybean had a total value of $768 per acre. In our trials, the average soybean yield loss was 43%. That works out to $332 per acre. And in our most competitive environment, the yield loss was 93%, and the monetary loss would have been $760 if that farmer didn't implement any weed management tactics on his farm. So exactly what we did in corn, we did the same thing in soybean. And so we looked at the soil-applied herbicides, Authority Supreme, Bifecta, Triactor, Volterra. They gave around 80% control. And the best soil-applied herbicide for the control of multiple herbicide-resistant water hemp is Fierce, right? So it's the best. The next thing I'll say to you is the margin of crop safety is the narrowest, right? So Fierce is really good on water hemp. All of our data has shown that consistently. Man, if you have a cold, wet spring, this herbicide can be quite hard on the crop. Anyways, here's the weedy control. Notice the excellent control with Fierce in that particular study. On average, it gave 90% control. In that one, it's closer to 100. So I think, just like I said in terms of corn, if you have water hemp on your farm and you're planning to plant soybean in a field with water hemp, I think you should plan to use a 2-pass weed control program. If you're growing identity preserved or Roundup Ready soybean, in this research by Mike Shriver, he started with Boundary or Authority Supreme, and then he came back with either Blazer or Reflex post-emergence. And you can see with a 2-pass program, the control was 98 to 100%. In terms of in Roundup Ready Extend soybean, in this research by Brittany Hedges, Zidua provided 71% control. Authority Supreme and Boundary were 82 and 85. And Fierce was 90%. That's not good enough with Waterhemp. You can't have only 90% weed control. And so where it was followed with a post-emergence application of Roundup Extend, you can see that the control was 96 to 99%. So this is one of the experiments. Authority Supreme provided on average 82% control, and where you followed it with a post-application of Roundup Extend, it was 99% control. And finally, in E3 soybean, in this research, Boundary, Authority Supreme, and Fierce provided 83 to 95% control, and where it was followed up with an application of Enlist Duo, you can see the control was 99% with all three programs. So in terms of E3 soybean, this is a field in Lambton County. Obviously it's glyphosate-resistant Waterhemp, and then a two-pass program of Boundary followed by Enlist Duo, and that's pretty impressive control of Waterhemp. So to summarize the control in soybean, just like in corn, I think you have to start with a soil-applied herbicide and follow it with a planned post-emergence herbicide. I think the best soil-applied herbicides are Fierce, Valterra, Tractor, Bifecto, or Authority Supreme. I underlined Fierce. It gives the best control of Waterhemp. It also has the potential to cause the greatest crop injury in a stressed environment. If you're going identity preserved or Roundup Ready soybean, you would start with one of those soil-applied herbicides, and you can come back with either Reflex Blazer or Hurricane post-emergence. In E3 soybean, you start with a soil-applied, come back with Enlist 1, Enlist Duo, or Liberty. And in Extend Flex soybean, you can come back with the Ingenia Extendamax or Liberty. So my final slide on Waterhemp before I get to Canada fleabane. Since Waterhemp is such a prolific seed producer, one female plant in a study done in Iowa produced 5 million seeds, right? So this plant has an amazing ability to produce a lot of seed. So since Waterhemp is such a prolific seed producer, it emerges throughout the growing season, and it has a high propensity to evolve resistance to multiple herbicide modes of action. I think the goal of Waterhemp management should be perfect 100% weed control in every field every year and zero weed seed return to the soil. I don't think I ever said that for any other weed species in my career. This is such a challenging weed. You've got to do everything you can to get perfect control. You don't want to have weed seed return to the soil and have to deal with this weed on your farm for the next 20 years.